Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris back again. This week going back 15 years as we talk about the debut album from the Welsh progressive metal band Lost in Thought. Kind of an underrated gem that may have gone under people's radars when it came out. But we'll talk all about Lost in Thought. Before we get there, how are you, my friend?
I'm good. I'm taking a WrestleMania break to talk to you about Lost in Thought. I watched some of SmackDown on Friday night. I fell asleep during the end of it, then woke up, stayed awake till midnight to watch the Hall of Fame, made it to 1:30 in the morning, watched the rest the next day. Then I watched most of night one of WrestleMania last night. Night two is tonight. And the only reason I bring it up is because our good friend Keith is at WrestleMania watching it live. And so, Keith, by the time you hear this, it'll be over, but I hope you had a good time. Don't get too crazy on the bubble wrap. And yeah, let's talk about Lost in Thought.
Before we get there, I want to mention something that I purposely put off last week, which was talking about this Beast in Black Halloween show. Which I finally had the pleasure of seeing a week after you did. What can I say? I'll start with Beast in Black. You know, every time I listen to a Beast in Black song, I just absolutely love their songs more and more. I love everything they've ever done, but I think that they are disappointing live. And I'm not saying that this show was bad. It wasn't bad. I like them. But I think that Halloween blew them off the stage just because they had so much more of a fuller sound. And the keyboards and some of the samples are such a prevalent part of Beast in Black's sound that it loses a little something in the live show, to say nothing of the fact that Giannis's vocals are top notch, but a lot of the backing vocals are piped in and it just loses something for me in a live setting. That being said, all I wanted to do after the show was go home and listen to the albums because I love the songs. So before we get to Halloween, your thoughts on Beast in Black?
I literally did just that. I went home and listened to Beast in Black because I'd forgotten how much I enjoyed their songs. And I think that if you come into it with the perspective of Knops, who I was with, who wasn't familiar with their stuff, I think that he was more impressed with the live performance because he didn't really have, you know, the live recording in his head to compare to. He was just basing it off of what he was hearing live, and he really liked it. And so I think from that perspective, like, you know, I think that they're probably a better live band than probably the people like us that like really poured over the albums give it credit for. But that said, there definitely is a missing element. I think like they were missing Anton on guitars, and then, you know, plus what was already backed. But that said, they put on a fun show. Like, you know, I think that Giannis is a really charismatic frontman and is a really good live vocalist. And so you can't really make the songs like not good because the songs are just catchy and fun. And so even to hear them perform live, even if it's at like a 70 or 75%, you know, clip, it was still really enjoyable. And I have to say, I thought they were way better than when we saw Hammerfall open for Halloween. I felt like Hammerfall really, at least to me, it felt like they kind of sleptwalked through that set almost as if they're like, okay, we're not the headliners, so we're not going to play like headliners. And I felt like Beast in Black just brought a lot more energy and fun. And I feel like the people, at least in Atlanta, really seemed to enjoy it. So I think that they were a good choice as opener. And I guess, I mean, considering they opened for Halloween in Europe, clearly the band was pleased with them as an opener. And so they brought them with them, and it was good. You know, 10 songs, lots of fun. It was all good. Like if they were headlining, I might be more critical, but as an opener, I thought it was just right for what you want, like right before a Halloween show, and not like some weird unknown band that like, you know, doesn't fit the mold and doesn't make any sense. Like, why is this band opening for Halloween? So it was good.
I would see them again in a heartbeat. It's just not. There was something missing, and maybe the second guitar would have helped with the fuller sound. I don't know, but Halloween takes the stage, and I was excited. The show in New York City was sold out. It was a venue that holds about 2,200 people. It was packed to the gills, I have to say, absolutely packed. And I had not seen the set list. I made a point to avoid the set list. And never in my wildest dreams did I expect them to open with March of Time. That was such a cool surprise because it's not, I mean, listen, it's one of their, I mean, it's a great song, but I don't think anyone would have said that they're starting with An Eagle Fly Free or one of the more traditional opening tracks. This was kind of out of left field, and it made me think to myself, what else are they going to play if they're opening with March of Time? But the show was great. I'm just going to name a couple of highlights or things that stuck out to me. I don't want to belabor the point too much, but I forgot how good of a song The King for 1,000 Years was. It was a song that I never paid much attention to because I didn't think the Keeper's Legacy album was very good. That's a really good song, and it comes off great live.
100% agreed, and I thought that opening with those two tracks like really set the tone for the whole night. Two very different eras of the band, but I think that when they initially announced this reunion, I kind of assumed that like, okay, Kisk is going to come out and do his songs, and Darius is going to come out and do his songs, and Kyle come out and do a couple songs from Walls of Jericho, but they've really done a hell of a job integrating all 7 members into the whole process. Like there are definitely some songs where it's just one vocalist, but like, hearing Kisk sing on some of these Darius songs and vice versa, and the way that they've had Andy do the lower parts and Kisk do the higher parts, and the harmonies that they're doing together, like it's beyond what I could have imagined when they announced this, and I was imagining a lot. It's really, I think, turned into this unbelievably well-oiled machine. And I said to you, like, had I created the set list, there would have been like 3 songs, probably 3 or 4 songs tops that I would have chosen from this set list. But that said, they have such a expansive library that like it's really fine. Like they really could play just about anything and I would be happy, but like I definitely would have swapped out like a Dr. Steen or an I Want Out for some more obscure tunes. There was so many Andy Darius albums that were just not represented at all, yet Rabbit Don't Come Easy and Keeper of the Seven Keys, The Legacy had albums, but then like literally nothing from that point on until the most recent album was represented. And there's so many good songs on Gambling with the Devil and My God-Given Right and Straight Outta Hell and Seven Sinners. That whole like late period of the late Darius era has so many good songs, and like even Master of the Rings only having In the Middle of a Heartbeat being represented. They just have so much. Like what do you choose? Like even we talked about, they busted out Hey Lord, which is a track from Better Than Raw, and I'd argue it's like my second least favorite track on the album, but I was still so happy to hear it because I went back to the set list, the very first set list of the tour, which was in October of last year. And so it shows like when the last time some of these songs were played. And Hey Lord hadn't been played live since 2004. So wow, getting to hear that song live for the first time in 22 years, even though it's not my favorite song in the world, it was so cool just to hear it because it was something different. And they played Twilight of the Gods, which was insane. And I didn't realize that they hadn't played that song live since the Keeper 1 tour.
Wow.
And so that's so cool. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I agree with all that. Wouldn't have been my choice of songs from Better Than Raw, but I marked that when they played it because I wasn't expecting them to cover the album. Another highlight for me.
We Burn was another one.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That was insane. The other highlight for me was, believe it or not, watching Darius and Kisk do the acoustic set where they're basically playing guitar on each other's songs. I thought that was so freaking cool, to say nothing of the fact that they interspersed a little Elvis, a little Beatles. It was like watching what I like and what my parents like all in the same with two of my favorite artists doing it. It was really surreal. That was one of the best things I had seen at the show.
What did which Beatles songs did they play? Did they play Let It Be?
Let It Be.
Yeah, that's what we got too. I'm
assuming it's the same.
I'd seen that it changed here and there, depending.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, and the other thing that was kind of a bummer is that in Europe they were playing "Pink Bubbles Go Ape" the song before the two acoustic songs, and I guess they left it out in the U.S., which that would have been fun just to hear that. But yeah, in the middle of a heartbeat and a tale that wasn't right. That was chef's kiss. That was, and then especially because after the first verse of A Tale That Wasn't Right, the rest of the band comes out and they do the electric part of the song. That was really, really cool. Just a really awesome 10 minutes if you're a fan of like Halloween power ballads, and that was super cool. I know that I'm sure the both of us probably had trepidation about the band getting along when they first got back together because there was a lot of drama over the years, but it to me feels so palpable how much Andy and Kisk are enjoying performing together, and that
seemed if they're faking it, they're doing a hell of a job. You know what I'm saying? Like it seems so natural and legitimate. It's crazy. And by the way, shout out to Kai Hansen. When he stopped singing for Gamma Ray, I figured his voice was shot, but he does vocals on this tour, and not only does he do Ride the Sky, which is just an all-time classic, but when they started playing Heavy Metal Is the Law, I couldn't believe it. Like, I marked out. Like, they really just were able to touch all 40 years, that being at the very beginning of the era. I thought it was just such a fun show, and I'm kicking myself that I'm not going to get to see them again for how many years.
I know. It's almost a shame, and I know I'm asking a lot of a bunch of guys whose youngest member is like 50 years old, but like, it would have been so cool if they did 2 nights with like different set lists because there's just so much to cover.
But they played for 2 hours and 15 minutes and it didn't stop. And it was like,
it wasn't enough.
It wasn't enough, but you can't say you didn't get your money's worth. You left that show and you're like, that was awesome.
They played a little as a little too much, but I felt like a lot wasn't enough in this case. They did play a good bit of songs off the newest album, 4 tracks, but at the same time, they didn't play anything from the album before it, which like, it's not, it's not that old. But again, like I said, it's just a embarrassment of riches, just so many great songs. And I think that like also over time, I think I've lowered my expectations, like where I know I'm not going to get like this, rarities fest. They're playing for, generally, I think, more casual fans of the band that want to hear Future World, that want to hear I Want Out, that want to hear Dr. Steen. I'm not going to lie. I don't think I would ever take Eagle Fly Free out of the set list. I don't care how many times they've played it. That, of all the songs that they played, when they started playing that song and like something just comes over me when I hear that song live, I still think that it's probably the greatest power metal song ever written. And of course it was written by Michael Wycath. But to me, like that song will never ever get old. And I like that they saved it for the encore rather than, cause I think they had been opening with it, or at least playing it early on during the last tour. And I feel like that's a song that honestly could be the last song on the tour. Like it's just that epic. But it was the encore of Eagle Fly Free, Power, Dr. Steen, and then the end of Keeper of the Seven Keys. I mean, and that was after playing all of Halloween.
Which I was going to say was what a fitting way to end the regular set with Halloween. Like that is somehow an underrated Halloween song. And it's, I don't even want to say underrated because everyone loves it, but like, nobody talks about it, but that song is ridiculously good, and it comes off great live.
I think it's because they didn't play it live for a long time. Like after, I don't even know if they were playing it during like the Pink Bubbles and the Chameleon years when Kisk was still in the band. But after that, I don't think it was until maybe like the Rabbit or the Keeper Legacy tour where they started bringing it back out. And it might have been the Keeper Legacy tour where they did that. It was like a medley of the Keeper of the Seven Keys, Halloween, and King for 1,000 Years. And I mean, as much as I love Halloween and King for 1,000 Years, you have to think about, like, maybe they could have played like 2 or 3 other songs if they went with shorter tracks. Again, just a lot of nitpicking as like an old time diehard fan of the band, but not to take away from the fact that I had an absolutely great time. There's not very many bands that exist that I would be willing to drive 6.5 hours there and 6.5 hours back the next day to see and feel like it was worth that trip. And this certainly was. I had a really great time, and I got to sneak in a little visit to the Vortex beforehand as well. So all in all, really outstanding. I just hope that as the band continues, they cycle out some of the songs and bring back, the Hey Lords and the Twilight of the Gods and some of the songs that they just haven't played live in a long time. I mean, I have some personal requests that are like mostly like later era Wyke tunes, like Creatures in Heaven from My God-Given Right, and Years from Straight Outta Hell, and The Sage, the Fool, the Sinner, or Who is Mr. Madman from Seven Sinners, and I'll mention also Heaven Tells No Lies from Gambling. Like, there's just the tune from Rabbit. Like, there's so many amazing songs that I feel like the band probably didn't even think about, and I'm not even going to go into the Roland and the Uli songs. It's just such an unbelievable catalog, and I really look forward to our next discussion, which will be on Better Than Raw later this year. Just because, like, it's, our love for this band is undeniable.
Yes, I mean, I feel like we could do 3 hours on the show alone, but we'll cut it there. I just want to mention one album that I listened to this week, which was really incredible, and it was not something that was on my radar, but I was. This one came to us courtesy of the Harsh Vocals podcast. Check them out if you haven't heard their podcast, which obviously focuses on the heavy side of things. But they had mentioned an album by a band called The Silver, and the album is called Looking Glass Hymnal Blue. These guys are out of Wisconsin and Philly and other parts of the U.S. It sounds like European post-black metal with really proggy tendencies, because they do a little bit of prog rock, a little bit of prog metal, a little bit of black metal, a little bit of post stuff. It is all over the place. I don't know that I've heard anything quite like it, and I was enamored by this disc after the first listen. I'm going to go back to it. I really don't even know what I heard, but I just know that I liked it. And so I wanted to give that band a shout out. I'll post one of their songs this week, but that was really what I focused my attention on later this week. Also, I should mention the new Crimson Glory is out. That's an enjoyable listen, especially if you're a longtime fan of the band. As I think Charles so aptly put it, if I'm not mistaken, this felt like a Crimson Glory album. It didn't feel like just an album that came out from Crimson Glory. It felt like a Crimson Glory album, and I thought that was really cool, because they sounded just like the band that you would have hoped for, whether it was Midnight or Wade Black or whoever was going to sing for them. This sounded like the next piece of the band's catalog, so that was cool.
I'm looking forward to listening to this one. I just literally added it to my my listening playlist because the band's playing at Prog Power this year. Especially, I want to kind of give a listen to this new album. I'm not really that familiar with their older stuff, but they don't really have a ton, so it should be an easy catch up. Maybe we could even do one of their classic albums on the podcast before Prog Power rolls around. I could certainly use the lesson. I remember our friend Mike had the Astronomica. Thank you. I don't know why I had such a hard time with that. I remember he had that disc, and he really liked it. And I remember him telling me that that's Dr. Killdrum's Steve Wackles was the drummer for that album, and for those unaware, he was the longtime drummer for Sabotage. So looking forward to this. I did check out the Chasing the Hydra single, and I thought it was pretty solid. So I will definitely give this a listen. The other thing I wanted to mention was Vision Divine released their first single with Michelle Lupi in a very long time, and it's called 18 It Feels Like Heaven. It will be on their Clockwork Reverie album that's being released later this year. All this did was just get me more excited to see the band in Norway in May with Loopy. It will be my first time seeing them with him at the helm. Actually, it'll be my first time seeing the band in any form. So great track. I think I had said to you earlier in the week, it feels like he's where he belongs. Like his voice to me, as much as I love those first two albums with Fabio, his voice, I think, just fits the band so well. And when I hear his voice, I don't think of Secret Sphere or even Whitesnake. I just think of Vision Divine. And so I'm really excited to hear. I've just heard so many amazing things about his live vocal performance that I'm really excited about that. But definitely check out that new single. And I will mention the one new album I got to listen to was Lord of the Lost, Opus Noir Volume 3. Really just on par with the first two volumes that came out last year. Good, just, solid gothic metal that I think is very palatable for more casual fans and people that aren't as into heavy metal. I think that Lord of the Lost, along with, I think, Voyager, depending on the songs, interestingly enough, both Eurovision, bands, but I think that they are really good bands for introducing somebody into metal that might not be as familiar with it, because I think that there's a lot of melodic, catchy stuff, but also, traditional metal elements that I think does a nice job of doing, fulfilling both sides of the, of being good metal, but also being easily accessible and catchy.
Yeah, well said. Well, great single. Looking forward to the album immensely, and can say, having seen them multiple times now, you are in for a real treat. I won't say anything else other than I have a feeling you're going to enjoy that show immensely. So let's talk about the main event, shall we? I had picked Lost in Thought, a band that for many have been lost in thought because they have not put out consistent material. They only have 2 albums. The one, Opus Arise, is their debut. It came out April 29th of 2011. So we're just coming up on 15 years for this. It's an album that I wanted to talk about for quite some time. I remember when this album came out, it was the talk of the prog metal world. And then it kind of just faded away because they didn't follow it up with an album for nearly 7 years when Renaissance came out. And then I think they also came out with an album in 2020 as well. But the reality is, this was the album, I think, that put them on the map. This was the album that people started talking about this band. And after the album, they would go through several lineup changes and things like that. And I'm not going to say that I didn't enjoy the other albums, but the reality is, this is how I first heard the band, and I never really got that sound out of my head. So I didn't enjoy the second album as much because I had this idea of what they should sound like or what they could sound like, and they just sounded a bit different. Now, I should go back to the album, I'll admit. But I just remember loving this when it first came out, and my first thought was, these guys have to play Prog Power. They are the consummate opening band for Prog Power, and it never quite happened. And so this album has been lost to time for many people, and for many of the people that are listening to this podcast, they're probably not even familiar with the band. So I figured, let's cover the album, let's talk about it, and we'll go from there. Again, it's just kind of one of the more obscure albums that we're going to cover. But before we talk about the band and the album, your thoughts on this band and how you first came to hear about them.
I'm sure it was you recommending this album, because I went into my library and sure enough, there it was. And so I definitely had listened to it when it first came out. Blood Red Diamond was a track that you had put on a playlist in January of 2012, which means that it was, as a matter of fact, it was the last song on that list, which I think that would make that your album of the year for 2011. Does that sound about right?
It It does, although admittedly, I don't recall that I was necessarily tracking my best albums back then. But having gone back to listen to this, I'm not sure that there was anything better I heard that year. So I think it's safe to say it would have been my album of the year. It's one of the best debut albums I've ever heard. We talked about Pure Reason Revolution, and I talked about my love for the Dark Third. Obviously, that's an all-timer. And that was a debut album. But this was another incredible debut album that I'm not sure that they were ever able to reach those heights again.
This playlist that you made is like giving me major nostalgia. Like so many, I remember this playlist.
What's on there? Because I don't even think I have it at this point.
I will say Borealis, Theocracy, Lepra, Symphony X, Eumeria, Within Temptation, Evergrey, Jolly, Royal Hunt, Appearance of Nothing, Nightwish, Mirath, Edguy, Until Rain, Power Quest, Amorphous, Van Gogh, Amaranth, Dragonland, Haken, Deer Hunter, Earthflight, Eldritch, Nemesis, Voyager, Episode, Mercenary, Serenity, Fair to Midland, While Heaven Wept, and Lost in Thought.
Yeah, that was awesome. I did a really good job on that one. I'm not going to lie.
Good year.
Yeah, it was a good year. It must have been a best of, because that's a long playlist.
Yeah, that was, I think, your favorite albums of the year before. Maybe not in any particular order, but I remember really liking Blood Red Diamond to the point that I added it to one of my playlists, and I've listened to the song tons of times over the years, and so I always was super familiar with that track, but I did not really remember the rest of it.
Well, I guess it was definitely time, because as much as I love that track, and it is a great track, I would argue that there's other tracks on here that are just as good, if not better, and several of them. So it's just a really good album, I think, from top to bottom. So, as I mentioned, came out in 2011, April of 2011. At the time, the band was David Gray on guitars, backing vocals, does lead vocals on a track. Nate Loosemore, that's a hell of a name, for the lead vocals, and this guy has some set of pipes. Simon Pike on bass.
Does he have an OnlyFans though with a name like that?
Maybe that's why he left the band. I don't know.
God bless.
Simon Pike on bass, Chris Billingham on drums, and Greg Baker on keyboards. So that rounds out the band, as I mentioned.
Before you continue, I thought it was interesting looking at Metal Archives that like it doesn't seem like these guys did anything else.
Yes,
at least like this formation of the band. Like I didn't really see their names in other bands or anything like that. It feels like this was just a bunch of guys got together, started a band, and then made a couple albums. And do we know, are they still like an active band? Do you think there'll be another album?
I don't know. And I'll be honest, I tried to get an interview and I reached out to the band and I didn't hear anything back. So I don't know if they're defunct at this point. I truly don't know. I haven't given up hope yet. I may try some other things.
We're gonna get that Lost in Thought Twilightning tour one of these days. We're gonna get that one to happen.
Sign me up. I mean, you want to talk about two bands that were just lost to time. Those are two of them, to say the least. But yeah, really, really cool stuff. But that being said, your initial impressions, before we get into all the tracks themselves, your initial impressions when you first gave this a listen.
I didn't think this when I listened to Blood Red Diamond, several dozen times over the years, but when I popped on the first track, Beyond the Flames, the first thing I thought was this reminds me of Pagan's Mind in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
A lot of just the orchestrations and the keys and stuff had that kind of not exactly sure how you describe it. I don't know if it's like Middle Eastern or whatever, but definitely because they're both prog bands, I got Pagan's Mind vibes. I have to say I prefer the Lost in Thought vocalist to Nils. I was never like a huge Nils fan, although I like him. I just don't love him. And so the first thing I really thought, I was like, oh, this is like a more enjoyable Pagan's Mind for my ears. So yeah, that's kind of where I was at. I found the whole album start to finish to be really, really enjoyable and just, for whatever reason, like Pagan's Mind I could never get over the hump with them. And I feel like if it was more like this, I feel like it would have been a little bit easier for me. So those were really kind of my initial thoughts, was just like immediately comparing them to Pagan's Mind.
Yeah, I can hear that. That makes sense to me. But I also agree. I prefer this to Pagan's Mind. Now, I always thought Pagan's Mind had one great album and the rest was kind of lost on me. Probably should go back and talk about them at some point, in some way, shape, or form, because some of these other albums they did were like probably deserve more attention than I gave them. But that being said,
how did you get into Lost in Thought? Did you talk about that at all, or like
I don't think I remember. I just remember like at the time the album came out, they were like the talk of the prog metal world, and so I just picked up the album and I was immediately hooked. Like this was not an album that, I need to spend time with it. This was not like a Pain of Salvation album that I needed to listen to 20 times. I immediately liked it and then just kept going back to it because it was so catchy and accessible, but it was prog that was done in a melodic sort of way. It wasn't this esoteric prog that can be, more difficult to appreciate. This, you put it on and you know what it is immediately, and you're like, this is really good. I just enjoyed it from Jump Street.
Excellent. Yeah, that's awesome. And listening to it, I could see why. It's very much in your wheelhouse, but then at the same time, that melodicness and that non-esoteric, as you say, sound makes it also in my wheelhouse as well.
Yeah, very good, very good. And so with that, I say we get into it. The album kicks off with this nearly 7-minute epic called Beyond the Flames, and there's several of those tracks on the album. It only has 8 tracks. It's not an incredibly long or dense album. It's just really well constructed. The drum fill at the beginning reminds me so much of Mike Portnoy, and you can hear Dream Theater worship from the jump. You had mentioned Pagan's Mind. I get it. I hear a lot of Circus Maximus, and I hear it immediately on a track like this with the keyboards. The verses are kind of mid-paced, but the way the vocals just soar over the top of the melodies here, incredible. Whereas the chorus is a little bit more relaxed, almost like a prog rock type of ballad until the song gets cooking. Again, melody here drives the day. Awesome contrast and use of backing vocals. And then you get to some of these heavier guitar riffs at the end remind me a lot of The Mirror. So I'm hearing a lot of Dream Theater and a lot of Circus Maximus here. I think it's a very good opener, but the highlight of this particular track are the drums. The drums are outstanding on this tune.
Immediately, that was the first thing I heard too. Was oh my god, that was like a Mike Portnoy drum intro right there. I think The Mirror would be the right comparison, especially the way that it opens. Or no, I'm sorry, 6 o'clock. That's what it made me think of, that opening to Awake.
Okay.
Also the beginning of an album. So cool way to kind of kick things off. And I actually like where you think the song is over and then it starts up again towards the end. And I think the song really gets cooking at that point. Love the guitar and keyboard solos that are kind of side by side. Just a really, really enjoyable tune. I like this one a lot, and I found it stuck in my head actually quite a bit. Really catchy chorus, just a really good song overall.
Nice. Kind of curious as to what your song of the week could be, because obviously Blood Red Diamond is probably the front runner coming in, but I'm wondering if anything else eclipsed that. As we get to song number 2, this is a song I absolutely loved, and it was hard for me to pick a song of the week, but I think I'm going to go with track number 2, Entity. This one starts off really heavy with this punchy low end sound. I love the melodic verses, really cool use of angry backing vocals, and the lyrics are quite good too, kind of introspective. The keyboards are great, and they really add such a dynamic to parts of this tune, including the pre-chorus. The vocal prowess and the vocal range of Mr. Loosemore is just incredible, and it's almost a shame that he didn't sing on anything else because he's such a vocal talent. It almost seems effortless when he's singing on a song like this. I think Entity is a little bit more of a toe tapper, a little more of a headbanger than Beyond the Flames. But the construction of this song is what really impressed me because each section flows so nicely into the rest. The keys are the highlight on this one, and I think it gives me a real Derek Sherinian sound with some of the keyboard patches. Let's give Entity a listen. I want to get your thoughts when we come back. So that was Entity, track number 2. I'm a little hesitant to pick it as my song of the week, only because there's so many other good candidates, not because this one was bad by any means. Obviously, it's a standout track, but it's a standout track on an album filled with them. Curious about your thoughts on this second tune.
Another good one for me. One of the things that just comes to mind for me when I hear this is that every single member of the band is represented really well. Like the keyboards are very keyboard forward, but also I feel like the keyboards and the guitars are very even keeled. Like they're very both part of it. It's not like guitar driven with a touch of keyboards or vice versa. They're both holding down the fort. The drumming, like you mentioned on the first track, is outstanding. The singing is great. The bass playing is strong. The mix is great. And this song, I think, wraps all of that all into one tidy little package. Great tune. And again, like I think even better than what Dream Theater was doing around this time in 2011. It's just a little bit more accessible to my ears and easier to, I think, grasp onto. I don't know if it's because I like the vocals better or what, or maybe it's just a little bit more simplistic than what particularly, Petrucci and Jordan Rudess were doing in their instrumentation. This just kind of, I feel like if I had listened to this album at the time, which I did, I don't know that I would have appreciated as much as where I'm at now, 15 years later, where I think I've just listened to a lot more different styles. And I think this was the right time for me to listen to this album, and a great choice for Song of the Week. Literally, I felt like any of these songs would have been good candidates, but I did go with Blood Red Diamond just because it was so familiar and I liked the song so much. And I think I would have had to listen to the album maybe a 6th, 7th, or 8th time to really find another track that like really spoke to me. It's even though it's a very accessible album, I think there's a lot going on, and it's more dense than I think you would expect it to be. And so I think it would have been a service for me to listen to it a bit more. So I feel like I'm kind of hedging by choosing the song I knew really well, but it's a great song, and I think that it actually feels a bit different than the rest of the album. In retrospect, it has kind of a more like radio song kind of accessibility to it. Could easily see why you chose it on your playlist all those years ago. But I really like this one, so let's give it a listen. We'll come back, hear your thoughts on it, and we'll march on.
We're the nature beast.
That was Blood Red Diamond. I don't fault you at all for picking it as your song of the week. It's kind of a majestic tune with some of the catchiest melodies on the album. I love the keys and the vocals during the verses. It reminds me a lot of Alive by Circus Maximus, which is one of my all-time favorite songs. So there's nothing at all wrong with that. And I feel like the song just kind of tells a story as it kind of carries on. The instrumental section is really riff-driven, but in that proggy sort of way. And then the bridge is a bit of a reprieve before the strong finish. But this is such good stuff, and I just miss this magic that they were doing back in 2011, because like I said, you wouldn't hear this kind of stuff going forward necessarily. And by the time you got to their next album, it was 7 years later anyway.
You know, as much as there's like a lot of Dream Theater love here, like this just does not feel like a song that Dream Theater would have ever written. Like it just has its own kind of vibe to it. And obviously I think they were taking a lot of influence from Norwegian prog metal bands like Pagan's Mind and Circus Maximus, as mentioned. But man, the Mike Portnoy drum love is on display also on this one, and I think it's even more prevalent because it's a more like mid-tempo and deliberate song. So especially in the soloing, you really hear some of those Portnoy-esque drum fills, and it's if you're like, you know, a nostalgic person like I am, like this like really fills in a lot of you know, that love for just hearing stuff that is comforting and warm for you. And so like that, I think that made this kind of an easy like for me overall.
Yeah, I totally agree about that nostalgia with an album like this. A lot of prog albums and a lot of albums in general have a fourth track, which is kind of a ballad. And I don't know why they do it, but it must be to just break up the album and seek to find the fourth track. Starts out like it's going to be a ballad, but then when it really gets going, it's not a ballad at all. It's kind of heavy. It is mid-paced tune. And the keyboard melody with the solid riffs that back this up are phenomenal. And I thought there was a good chance that you would fall in love with this track because it's so keyboard heavy. The chorus is excellent, and the vocals are out of this world on this particular tune. It's slightly formulaic in terms of how prog is done, but it's done to perfection. And the keyboard solo is like a homage to Home by Dream Theater, which is never a bad thing. In fact, a lot of the song has elements of Home in it. This is a really, really good track. And again, as far as I'm concerned, they're 4 for 4 at this point. Yeah,
this is an excellent song. I love the just the rhythm, the keyboard rhythm that goes with the chorus. It is so like you said, like my vibe, that just really heavy keyboard influenced type of music. And so yeah, I like this song a lot. Like I said, any one of these songs really could have been my song of the week. I enjoyed all of them pretty equally, but this is a good one. They really had a gift for writing a really good hooky chorus like that. You just hear it, and the vocalist has some really soaring vocals that I think in this track really are they really shine here. Just another outstanding tune, really good stuff.
Yeah, I will not say that the album is a perfect album, though. In fairness, I think that one of the weaker tracks is the next one, New Times Awaken. It starts off with this acoustic guitar, and of course that really just lends itself to the ballad type of feel, but it doesn't really stay that way entirely. The bass really pops, I think, during the verses on this tune, and the electric guitar gives me Falling Into Infinity vibes, just with the whole the pacing and the guitar tone. It really has this epic build, like a lot of Dream Theater songs were doing in this era. I wouldn't say, though, that it's my favorite track on the album. It's not an all-time classic tune, but it certainly has its place on the album. It's just not my favorite song.
You're never going to believe what band this song made me think of, but believe it or not, it was Angra. I feel like the lower vocals remind me so much of Edu during the early 2000s era of Angra, which I guess what's old is new again because they're touring with him right now. but his low register reminded me a lot of Edu's vocals. I don't know that necessarily the song reminded me of an Angra song, but those vocals, especially in the verses, just kind of took me right back to that like rebirth era of Angra. Kind of a chiller song, but I think it really picks up with the right before the solos kick in. The song just really kind of picks up some steam, and so it still has kind of that almost melancholy kind of vibe of a power ballad, but it has a little more oomph to it, especially towards the end. I thought it was a solid track. Probably wouldn't say it's my favorite on the album either, but I think that it fits nicely with the rest of the album, and also is kind of placed in a perfect spot, almost dead center. I think it kind of provides like a little bit of a breather, and I think it's well placed. We always harp on placement of songs and how sometimes it doesn't feel like it's the most, best use of time management, I guess. But I think they did a nice job placing this one here, and I really just love the little just that very like majestic like little riff at the end to end the song. I feel like it almost felt like the end of an album, just the last 5 seconds, but I think it was cool. It was like a little just a little like I don't know what the word. What's that?
Flourish.
Yes, thank you. That's exactly what I was looking for. A little flourish right at the end of the song.
Again, I liked it. I don't mean for it to second to say, oh, he doesn't like the song. I just think that it's not the best. And then as you get to the next one, Delusional Abyss, it picks up again. And I happen to love this song. So it's like, it just has the unfortunate distinction of being a good song filled on an album with many great songs, I think. Delusional Abyss is kind of a slower but heavier tune with really pronounced low end and solid riffs. The verses remind me a lot of early Haken music, and I thought of Knops when I was listening to this. I hear a lot of Haken on this track, and I love how the chorus slows down almost to this sludgy crawl, but it retains the melody the whole time. Really cool elements there. And then the second verse is a lot more deliberate, a lot faster, and the drums start to shine. This one I don't know that I ever fully appreciated, but I actually like this more this week than I think I ever did in the past. And then you've got this bridge with just the piano and the harmonizing vocals, and then an acoustic guitar before the instrumental section. Just really well constructed. Big fan of Delusional Abyss. And again, I don't know that I even enjoyed this as much then as I did this week. This one really popped this week.
I was disappointed that this song was not about the time that Abyss turned into Joseph Park, the lawyer on TNA Wrestling.
That's a deep cut.
Yeah, real deep. I reminded me of that time that he attacked RVD with that bat. I don't know if it was like a barbed wire bat or I think it was a bat with nails sticking out of it. So I got to think.
And then you wonder why they never went anywhere.
I know, because they were murdering people on television. That notwithstanding, this one I think also kind of goes back into the more like kind of deliberate prog tempo, where it's just like very mid-tempo, but it feels like it's like deliberately mid-tempo. It's not one of my favorite songs on the album either, but I think, again, it's well placed. It's a solid tune, don't get me wrong. I just think that some of the songs we've discussed up to this point I like a little bit more. But again, just I really think the vocals are really worth focusing on because they're really good. And there's a really good guitar solo too during the last minute of the track. So it definitely has its place. But I also think that, like, to me, I don't think the song needed to be like 7+ minutes. I feel like it kind of made its point in the first 4 or 5 minutes. But, it's prog metal. So what are you going to do? Most tracks are going to be at least 6 minutes.
Well, you get to the longest song on the album next, and that's the penultimate track, a track called Lost in Thoughts, aptly named. This has this really big, bombastic start, and again, I hear a lot of Haken on this. The verses are a bit vanilla. I think it's painting a nice picture or a story for the listener. The chorus is tight, although I wouldn't call it one of their bests. I think the layered vocals here add a nice element. And the chorus has a real Seventh Wonder vibe. Very focused, really allows the vocals a chance to breathe. I think it's well placed, as it's a little bit less than some of the others. But that being said, the second half of this song is fantastic. It just has this majestic quality to it that really resonates with me. So it's not my favorite track. I wouldn't call it an A+, but it's a solid tune and definitely, again, I think well placed before you get to the last track, which I've got a lot of positive things to say about.
I like this song quite a bit more than Delusional Abyss. I just think that all the parts that of the song I just think it does a little bit better. I think the drums are a little bit more, just stated. Like I feel like they're more focused on. It has those really kind of like sludgy guitar riffs that really bring me back to like the 90s prog in a lot of ways. Particularly, I think Dream Theater would bust that sound out, maybe a bit more in like the Train of Thought era of Dream Theater, but I think that, it's definitely there. I thought this was a nice step up from the previous track. And even though it's about the same length, I think they do more with the time than they did on the previous track. And again, just a lot of really, excellent musicianship from everybody involved here.
So we wrap this thing up with a song called Assimilate Destroy. This one has a bit of a different feel to it, especially at the start. I'm curious as to how you think this album kind of wraps up as we take this thing home.
I thought this was a really excellent choice for the last track because it has a really, I think, considering there's two songs preceding it that are longer, I feel like this has more of an epic feel. You get that really, really dramatic and slow kind of fade in, that kind of Sahara Desert, Middle East kind of like,
yeah.
I'm almost picturing that scene I'm picturing that scene in Wayne's World 2 where Wayne gets transported into the desert and meets Jim Morrison and Sammy Davis Jr. Keith knows what I'm talking about. How's that bubble wrap, buddy? But about a little bit more than a minute into it, all of a sudden the riffs kick in and the song appears to start taking a kind of a mid-tempo pace, but then it picks up and it's actually turns into one of, I think, the faster tracks on the album. And so I think the title is apt because it has like a kind of a quality to it that's like very the words are escaping me. I think the bubble wrap's really gotten me confused, but this turned out to be like one of my favorite tracks on the album, honestly, and I'm really glad that they ended with it because I think it took everything that the band had done great on this album up to this point, rolled it into like one really neat package, but that has a really epic prog feel to it, and then just that really kick-ass keys and guitar soloing at the end of the song before it reprises back to the chorus and just really ends the album strong. Really nice way to kind of land the plane, so to speak.
I think you're going to say I'm crazy, but I actually hear elements of power metal on this song, and I had a feeling you were going to like it, not only because it was a faster pace, but because those power metal elements, really with some of the drum fills and everything else, just lend itself to what you like. The other thing I would note is, you know what this song reminds me a lot of? It reminds me a lot of that band Sons of Apollo with Jeff Scott Soto, Sherinian, Portnoy. Now, obviously, Sons of Apollo was not a thing at this point because they only started performing like 8 or 10 years ago. But this particular track reminds me of something that they would have done. It was almost a precursor to what Sons of Apollo would be. Just a real gem of a song and just a perfect way to end the album, in my opinion. It sums up everything you've heard before, but just in a really nice package that's like makes you want to hear more. And unfortunately, it would be quite a while before you'd get it.
100%. I will. It's interesting because I always like to dive into metal archives and see what, people said about the album and things of that nature. And there's only 2 reviews for this album. And this is, I think most people would consider it one of the best prog metal albums from 2011 when it was released.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And so for there only to be 2 reviews, like, it must not have crossed a lot of people's, desks, so to speak. And so I wanted to pull a couple of quotes from some of these reviews just because I feel like it sums up the album nicely. Am I a Muck? Wrote a post in February of 2015 and said, the sound of the album can be described as a melodic, read nostalgic, take on progressive metal with hooks a la Anubis Gate and Circus Maximus. The production is warm, meaty, and in your face. Okay.
3 of my favorite things.
Yeah, amen. The album has been released on Inner Wound Recordings, whose roster includes Yorn, Andromeda, and Pyrames to give you an idea of the overall sound. Recurring themes in the lyrics are escaping demons, finding items lost in time, seeking destiny, and homecoming. Songs mix and match the following elements to create a formula: verse/chorus, proggy chuggy breakdown, clean tone, chord picking part, and solo section with occasional low volume spoken word parts. Really, I think, nice way to kind of sum things up. Then we have another review that came from Epic Andrew, and I thought that this was really well said. He says, Lost in Thought plays emotion-filled progressive metal that's full of great instrumentation, thoughtful lyrics, heavy riffing, and most of all, beautiful vocal lines and melodies. The vocals are by far the highlight for me about this band. Nate Loosemore certainly remembers Dream Theater's Images and Words album, as his falsetto vocals are very reminiscent of James LaBrie's falsettos. Although overall, this is no Dream Theater clone. This band definitely has a defining original sound. So I think both of those quotes are really well said. Am I a Muck gave it a 70 out of 100. Epic Andrew gave it a 95 out of 100 for an average of 83. I'm kind of right in that ballpark too. I'm going to give it a 7.875, just shy of an 8. I think that it would, I think it'll probably be an 8 given some time and spending more time with it. But as far as like a first time prog album goes, I mean, this one really impressed me.
Yeah, I obviously have a bit of rose-colored glasses with this because I've just loved the album since the day I first heard it. I acknowledge it's not Images and Words territory or anything like that. I also don't know that it's groundbreaking. I just think that they do a really good job of taking what you already knew and putting their own flourishes on it. So I'll give it an 8.5. I won't give it a 9. I don't think it's a perfect or a near masterpiece, but it's a really awesome debut album and one of the best prog debuts I've ever heard. I'm a big fan of it.
I'm listening to the very end of the last track, and there's like a part in the soloing that just reminded me so much of like the Imaginarium era of Nightwish, where it was like dun, 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 and I was like, oh my god, that's it's like they brought in Tuomas to write a little riff there for them. That like a lot of interesting bands kind of popped into my head as I listened to this, like I mentioned before with Angra. Yeah, it's a shame that this band has not done more. Just another album and 2 singles that followed this really brilliant debut. I'm curious to hear if any of our listeners are listening to this album for the first time, and if so, what they think of it.
I would love to hear that. I would also like to cover Renaissance just because I think it would be an interesting discussion. I don't know that it'd be as glowing, but I remember it being a good album, just not a great album. But again, worth covering at some point, I think. So glad to hear that. I just want to mention a couple of newsworthy items before we go ahead. The first is Iron Maiden, who has been invited to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame after all of these decades, well deserved. Ironically, they cannot participate because they'll be on tour, which is what the band does best. So kudos to them, but unfortunately they won't get to reap the benefits of their admittance. And they also have a really interesting documentary, I guess that we'll call it, that's coming out in theaters called Burning Ambition. Have you heard about this?
Very very little. Like, I know that it exists, but I haven't heard much about like what its focuses on or anything like that.
It's basically a documentary for theatrical release. It's coming out on May 7th, and it's really just a history of the band over the last 50 years that they've been in existence. And I saw the trailer for it, and it looks outstanding. So going to definitely try to make the point to go see that. Or
fantastic timing with the induction. Did you think that there was any chance that they would actually show up for this thing, or do you think that even if they weren't, I think that it worked out for them, because I don't think they really wanted to show up, and the fact that they were booked at that time kind of has a good built-in excuse. But are you expecting Blaze Bayley to just show up and accept the award on the behalf of the rest of the band?
Nothing would surprise me. Maybe they'll break out the Angel and the Gambler or something. I have no idea what
they're gonna have Nico and Blaze Bayley show up and accept the award.
Listen, God bless. Listen, at the end of the day, this is a band that deserves to be in. They are a first ballot Hall of Fame band for any heavy metal fan. I don't know that I've ever heard a metal fan be like, I don't like any Iron Maiden stuff. Like, Nobody can say that. They're that transformative.
I'll tell you what I am looking forward to is that obviously there's somebody's going to perform at least one or two Iron Maiden songs at this award ceremony. I'm just really curious, A, who, and B, what they play, because some of the performances at those Rock and Roll Hall of Fame ceremonies, say what you will about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and God knows everybody's got their opinion about it, but some of those performances are some of the greatest, collaborations of some of the greatest rock and roll and just music legends. I mean, I'll never forget seeing members of Rush and members of Pearl Jam on stage together playing, and thinking to myself, like, what a marriage of two of my favorite musical worlds together. And all I can do is just sit there and mark out. And like, I remember when Nirvana was inducted, and obviously, Kurt Cobain had been long gone at that point. They went an interesting route where they had, Chris Novoselic and Dave Grohl were there. They went with 3 different female singers to do the Nirvana songs, which is great, because I feel like you have less of a chance of being like doing that comparison of like, oh, that guy doesn't sound like Kurt Cobain. So they brought in, I want to say Joan Jett did a track. I think Joss Stone maybe did one, if memory serves, but whatever it may have been. They do some really fun and creative things over the years. I have a Blu-ray set that came out years ago of some of the best rock and roll, or I think it was the actual Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, like, anniversary show. And it had like Metallica and Tom Petty and like just all these great, and they would just have like random guy, like Eric Clapton would come out and play with Metallica. I don't know if that actually happened, but things of that nature. It's so fun if you're just a big fan of music watching that stuff. So all of that to say, I'm going to be tuning in just to see who they get. Like, I could only imagine like a Dave Grohl playing drums on the Trooper, and God knows who else. I just think it'll be a lot of fun. So I'm really excited to see that. And then we'll definitely talk about it when it happens. But yeah, it's always such an interesting topic of conversation, because people have some really strong thoughts about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Like, why are there hip hop artists in it? Why was, Dolly Parton inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Obviously rock and roll, I think I said in the past, it's more, I think, a state of mind than a genre. I mean, rock and roll is maybe the most generic description of so many wide varieties of music, and heavy metal is definitely a subsect of rock and roll. And then there's 5 billion, subgenres of metal. So just think about how many subgenres. And you know what? I think country, the stuff about country that gets pulled from rock and roll, there's stuff in certain hip hop songs where there's electric guitar solos and things. So almost every musical genre takes some rock and roll element and pulls from it. And so I'm not so much in the camp of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I think that there's some pretty insane omissions, and Iron Maiden's certainly been one of them. And so to me, I don't throw my middle finger up in the air that Iron Maiden got inducted. To me, I think it's cool. And I think it's cool when your peers acknowledge your contributions to a massive genre. And by I don't consider rock and roll the genre. I consider music. This is celebrating an all-time great band in the history of music being celebrated. And whether they're there or not, I'm sure there's going to be a killer speech, some killer performances. I would love to see Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson be a part of this. Typically, people that have already been inducted are part of the performances. So I didn't mean to go off on a tangent on this, but
no, listen, I love it. I'll say this. I'll say this. I think it's fitting that they're not there and that they're touring because that's what they do. I think it would be really cool if Judas Priest came out and played some old Iron Maiden because they've toured together and their histories kind of align in many ways. But whatever it is, I'll be curious to see if they do something other than Run to the Hills because it's a very accessible song. But at this point, I think it's not my favorite because I just played it to death. And it's just so synonymous with the band that I hope they do something a little bit different.
I think they should end the entire ceremony with Hallowed Be Thy Name, and like every single performing person that's there just comes out on stage and it's like 30 people playing Hallowed Be Thy Name, and that's how the show
including
ends.
The Wu-Tang Clan.
Yeah. That would be if they rapped one of the verses of Hallowed Be Thy Name, I'll mark out.
Well, the funniest thing, and I mean, we're really going off on a tangent now, but there's parts of that song that you could argue that Bruce Dickinson is actually rapping because of the speed at which the vocals are coming out. So I'm just saying, never say never.
I would have zero issue with seeing that. I think that would be so cool.
If anything, it would lend credence to Wu-Tang getting in, but again, that's a separate discussion altogether. One other piece of business I wanted to talk about, a band that we have not talked about, a band that I've gone on record saying that I've struggled with. I've only seen them live once. I've never really checked out the discs, so we have to cover them at some point. But I'm talking about Canada's Voivod, who are releasing a new live album called Symphonique, which is featuring the Quebec Symphony Orchestra. Always interested to hear bands when they collaborate with orchestras, but rarely is it a thrash band, and so this could be really interesting. I'm kind of curious to hear this. It's due out on June 5th, so that will be very interesting. That all said, I believe it is your turn to pick an album.
Would you believe that we're going to talk about a band that's already in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
That doesn't surprise me, but the question is, which one?
The band is Pearl Jam. You may have heard of them. But the reason I've chosen them is because May 2nd will be and God, this makes me feel old, the 20th anniversary of their self-titled album, otherwise known as Avocado, because literally the album is a avocado cut in half on a blue background. And I thought it was really interesting that for their 8th studio album, they decided to make a self-titled album. I know Dream Theater did something very similar to that, but this album marked a very important time in my music fandom because I wasn't quite back on the metal train yet, but I was just really getting my toe dipped into the Pearl Jam mega fandom, and this album literally came with the tickets that I purchased for the first Pearl Jam concert I ever went to, and it was for touring this album. So as one of the bonuses, they mailed you a copy of the album. Ticketmaster did. God bless those real awesome guys at Ticketmaster. Stand-up guys that haven't done anything to detriment any music. But anyway, this is one of my favorite Pearl Jam albums of all time, and I feel like everyone from the fans to the band itself does not give this album its flowers. It's like a rarity nowadays for the band to play anything from this album, which is crazy to me because I think it's probably their best post-2000 album, in my opinion. But I have been so excited to talk about this one, but I've been holding off on it because I wanted to wait for the 20th anniversary. So I'm pumped about this one. And I think that there's a lot of really good heavy elements that I think, like, there's some stuff that metal fans might enjoy, but I think this is the last non-metal album I'm choosing for the year, at least that I'm aware of, but I could not resist talking about this album. I just think it's an outstanding record.
Well, I look forward to it. I've heard the album several times, but I can't say that as I sit here, I'd be ready to talk about it today. I have to do some homework with this one, but I look forward to that. We've got a cool request coming in for May, the first album in May, and I've got some stuff lined up for May as well. So the train rolls on, as they say. A very good choice on the heels of some prog. So we'll go in a little bit more of an alt rock direction next week as we get into the summer months ahead. So thank you to everyone for listening. Give us a like and a follow if you like what you hear. If you're new to the show, consider joining our Patreon. It really does help support the show. And a big thank you to all those that have already joined. With that, anything else you'd like to add before we cut it here?
I do not.
Well, in that case, enjoy the week, my friend, and I will talk to you soon.
All right, go shine your blood red diamond.